Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Hampton and Richmond Borough Football Club. Today, my name is Louis. I'm joined by our under-19s manager. That's correct?
Manager, head coach.
Manager, head coach, Dale Blair. Thank you very much for joining me, Dale. How are you this evening?
Very good. Very good, thank you. I'm pleased to be asked.
Not every day you get to do a big interview, a match feature for Dulwich Hamlet. So some people who do end up watching this might be coming from that programme feature. So if you are new, welcome. First of all, just to get to know you a little bit, some people might not be too aware of who you are or what you do. So a little introduction, take it away.
Yeah, so coaching and being on the grass of football has always been my passion. So I've been quite fortunate when I started way back in actually the girls' game, Fulham Centre of Excellence, 2005, 2006, around that time. I was quite fortunate to be in good environments that allowed me to learn and develop. So be able to get in, be involved with Aldershot, Fulham, ASC and Wimbledon. In between, I've had a couple of trips out to the southeast where I was living and working out in Saudi Arabia. And since coming back, I think COVID kind of cut my stay short last end of March, beginning of April time. Came back, I was doing some work in the local area and got in touch with Steve and he sold me the project of the academy. And here I am. It's been a really, really good experience so far.
Yeah, so you said just before we hopped on, this is your first season with the club. How has things been generally?
A really good experience. I think whenever you're dealing with academy players, it's never the smoothest ride at times, but it's been a really good challenge on the player front to help them develop, trying to get them to first team level and beyond. In terms of the club, it's been a really welcoming environment, some fantastic people there. I think that's what's really stood out in terms of how welcoming they've been. It hasn't really felt like my first season. It feels like I've been there longer. And I think it's always a good sign when you've got good people to work with and come in and speak to and see all the time. It's been brilliant.
Yeah, not to come at it from too much of a biased angle on Hampton and Richmond's behalf, but you said that the welcoming environment stood out to you. Have you had instances where that's not been as much the case, not as a warm reception environment?
Yeah, I will say I've been quite fortunate in terms of worked in good environments with good people, but genuinely, and it's not wearing a Hampton hat now, it genuinely is a place that, it's that small club environment where it really does rely on the volunteers. It does rely on those people behind the scenes that you don't realise what they're doing to keep this club running. And it really, really is, people like, I'm going to name some names, I might miss some out, but people like Tracy, who I see, during the day, Bill Glasser, James, people like Seb, just love the club. And I don't think probably people realise all they do for the club, but they're really welcoming. They really care about it, and you don't often get that sometimes when you're working in a bigger club. Sometimes that can get lost. Certainly Fulham as an example. It's a bigger organisation with more people. It's very difficult to build those relationships with everyone. But at Hampton,
more bureaucratic, I guess.
Yeah. At Hampton at this season, we've been able to, because it's so small and you get to know everyone, you can build those relationships with people and really get to know them. So it's great when you come on a match day and like you say, I feel like I've been there much longer than the one season.
Oh, brilliant. So yeah, coming from a bigger club at Fulham, and as you said, having that more community, volunteer driven surroundings at Hampton, like what does that add to, coming into the workplace for you?
I think one of the football wherever you go, but one of the things that this academy, the challenges we face is that we don't necessarily have the pick of all the players. If you think about the clubs that surround us, we have some very big clubs around us, and it is a hotbed of football in some ways. So challenges for us are we have a limited pool that we can draw from, and sometimes those players might be further away from playing at a level. So actually, we need to give them more support and we need to give them more guidance. And having a tighter environment, having a close community of those people that even the players can get to know. They see Tracy, which is around the club, and they get to see all the volunteers and all the support stuff. Actually, we can create a tighter environment, and we can actually support these players, and maybe it moves them along faster in their development. So actually having a smaller club environment can really help a player settle, can make them feel like they're part of it quicker. Again, academies do some very good work, but sometimes you can get lost within the system. But actually having a small club environment for us can really help those players. They can get feedback from different voices, and they can get support from different voices rather than just us coaching staff. I know of 2 examples where players have had chats with 2 different members of staff, and sometimes you don't get that in other places.
A bit more of a general question off the back of that then. So a lot of people, I think, just might be interested in how an academy runs things. That's a very, very umbrella question, so I don't expect you to have a full breakdown of it. Just, I guess, for you, if you had to explain it to somebody who didn't quite understand the inner workings of an academy, how would you best go about describing what you do, how you go about finding these players? Do they come, is it at this level, is it more a case of them coming to you, and then what's those next steps?
Well, one thing I should say straight away is that Steve Bates, as the academy manager, has done a great job in shaping and developing the academy on to where it is today. I think he would be the first to admit when he first took over, it was in a very different place. And I would say, he's moved it on. Him and Andy, from the education point of view, Andy Hill, have really brought it on and developed it to a point now where we're looking to push it further. And I think when Steve first told me about the program, it was his enthusiasm and his kind of vision that sold me into it and really got me keen. So part of the appeal of this project was to try and help that and develop it. So we, in terms of our day-to-day operations, Steve's obviously the academy manager, oversees it. We run our under-19s National League squad, which this season we've kind of made our flagship team, if you like. So we have that as our performance squad. It's the one below the first team, essentially. We don't have a reserves or 23s. So our 19s we look at as the one below almost. So players are that close sometimes. We then have our under-18s. Under 19s playing our National League. Our under-18s playing in the Isthmian. So we've kind of termed that more as our development squad. Previous years that might have had a bit more of a focus upon it and a bit more of a spotlight in terms of playing the better players, if you like. But we've now probably made that squad a lot younger and stretched them and test them. And we've also kind of got our sort of third team as well. They're maybe not quite as close as some of the National League players to making that first team step or levels of football, but we're trying to give them the opportunity to represent Hampton and Richmond. So for some of them, putting on the shirt and representing the club is a big deal, which is still part of the academy environment. It's not just pushing players first team beyond. Yeah. Sometimes some players putting on that badge is important for them, and that might be a real career highlight for them.
You briefly touched upon the fact that education's become more important since you guys have, Stephen and yourself have put an emphasis on that. How important is that? Because I think that's, from an outsider's perspective, maybe something that a lot of people forget, that academies do place a lot of emphasis on education. How important is that for you, and how have you gone about making it a priority?
From my perspective, I think it's really important. It's something that I've said to the players right from the start. I think that in some ways probably more important than your football. You know, so we've used it as a way of kind of trying to help support their football. Your performance in the classroom should reflect your performance on the pitch. If there's a lack of performance in the classroom, that might start affecting how you play. You've got to stay ahead of your work. You've got to stay ahead of your deadlines and meet your deadlines in order to make sure you're performing on the pitch. I think the way I saw it and framed it at the start of the season was basically that they're almost student athletes. And they're full-time students, and essentially they're full-time footballers as well. But they're in 5 days a week. They got their education, and they train on Monday, Tuesdays, Fridays. They still get education on Thursdays, play games on Wednesdays. So essentially, they are full-time student athletes. But we don't want them just to come out and chase the football dream. We want them to come out as well-rounded people and have a good football experience, but more importantly, if they're not going to make that step into football, have something that they can go to university, or they can go into further education, or they can have something that's useful to them when they go into the workplace afterwards.
Obviously, you've got that benefit of having worked at a very high level club, so I feel like I will keep on sort of comparing the two. So in terms of education, are there any particular differences from that level down to the likes of Hampton and Richmond in how they prioritise how it's done?
I would say, and again, Andy and Steve would have better knowledge, but the qualification we offer is actually of a better standard than some of the BTECs that the other clubs tend to offer. So in a pro environment, whilst they provide support and they see it as important, the motivations, if I'm at a club like a Fulham or even at Wimbledon, for example, there's a pro contract at the end of it. So sometimes it can be, if I'm a very talented player and I'm making those steps to the first team, it can be quite easy sometimes to have that education drift off into the background a little bit and start to work and chase the contract on offer, if you like. And I can understand that sometimes. I think a club like us, whilst it'd be great to have a player and make that step back into the program and get that, the finances on offer here are very different. It's not something that they can suddenly, have a complete career on. So it's important that whilst they chase their football dreams almost, they're not completely so focused on that. They have that education option that can provide. So we've got a player at the moment, for example, who has been in around the first team the last couple of, David Amati, he's came on, made his debut not so long ago. He's been training really well with the first team. He's recently gone on loan to Harrow Borough. So he still has a focus on his football, but he's currently also doing a university course. So off the back of finishing the college program with us for 2 years, he's gone to do his university course and continues under 19s football with us. So he's that perfect example of making sure he's keeping his focus in the right areas and not just, all the eggs in the football basket. Which you want him to do well, and we want him to support, and we want him to go as high as he can. But I think we also need to be realistic about making sure he has other options as well.
Yeah. So I guess in many ways, it's, if you want to look at it in the most negative way, it's a backstop in case things don't work out. Best case scenario, they go on to have a good career at this level, and once they're finished, they've got something to fall back on and pursue afterwards, because we all know how short a football career can be. Do you agree with that, or am I a bit off there?
Not necessarily a backstop. I don't see it as something to fall back on. I think it's something that actually can run parallel. I think actually the habits that you can pick up in education can, if you start to embrace it and do well, can actually help you on the full pitch. Even things like getting your vision structures planned, meeting deadlines, getting an organised mind can actually help you on the football pitch, because the demands of a football match and the demands of I talk to the players a lot about who you are as a person in each environment. You are you don't really change. So if I'm sloppy and I don't mismanage in the classroom, what's suddenly going to change when I get on the football pitch? There's going to be moments in the game that my decision making is going to be like that. So we try to show the benefits of them being organised, they sound very simple things, but actually they become really, and we always reflect it back to a football scenario if they're not quite understanding. You know, we're in the 75th minute and I suddenly decide not to track my runner, or I second guess it and say, should I? And suddenly the player gets in and scores. That's that little moment that might lose the game 1-0. You know, so we don't see it as a backstop. I think it should be, it's about the benefits of both, and actually them learning also to deal with the pressures that come with that. I've got to be able to go and perform in training, and then I've got to go in the classroom and do my work. I've got to, you know, some of our boys, for example, have been training with the first team squad, so they might have a training session in the evening, get back, still have an assignment to get in. I think it's good. It's good life lessons. So it's not necessarily a backstop if things don't work out. I think it's actually skills that they can use throughout life, and I think that's the message we try to promote more.
Yeah. No, well, thank you for explaining and clarifying that. I think that's a very interesting point, especially as an outsider. This is, of course, your interview. This is the Dale Blair interview. So I do want to talk a little bit about yourself. Maybe we run the clock back to when you were first getting into football coaching. Just take us through that at the very beginning.
I have to thank, actually, I was at college. It was a PE teacher, A-levels, because it was, I think at the time I'd done my level 1 in the summer. And I think I remember there was an advert. One local guy started a coaching company. And I remember my PE teacher, Nigel Daly, he gave me this card and said, "You've got to call it." And being a typical young person at the time, you go, "Oh, yeah. I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks later, I think Nigel called me in the office and he asked me about had I called him. I said, no, I still hadn't done it. So there and then in the office, he picks up the phone, rings the number, and actually puts me on. And thankfully, it was putting me in touch with a guy called Alistair Jenkinson, who, you know, I worked with for 10, 12, maybe 13 years straight after that. He was really important in terms of providing support and helping me with my development as a coach. So yeah, it was a typical young person doing nothing that suddenly put me on the pathway. And I think once I got a taste of it, and I realised I was probably going to be a much, much better coach than maybe a player, I started to put my energies into
those that can't do, teach.
Well, yeah, yeah. I was okay with it, but I suddenly realised actually, you know what? There's a lot of players out there who are better than me, and I was okay with that. But actually, no, coaching actually was, I don't know, it's weird to explain it. Just kind of, it was something that I really enjoyed, and I became curious about it and started to ask more questions about how I can plan things, how I can structure things. You become curious about gaining new knowledge. And then obviously, then you start to follow your more formal coaching pathways in terms of level 2, B license, A license. So you follow that traditional pathway. But for me, it was just real curiosity in terms of trying to learn more, trying to interact with, how do I interact with players? How do I try and help players develop? How do I plan practices? I'm very sad about that. That's something that I can spend a lot of time talking about. But yeah, it kind of just sparked from that very first sort of phone call, and then being very fortunate to work in really positive environments. I would, the Fulham Girls Centre of Excellence, when I first started, for example, we didn't know it at the time, but a great group of staff that we still meet up a couple of times a year, and I'm still in close contact with all of them. I would imagine it was such a tight group of staff that really allowed me as a young coach to grow, to develop, and to make mistakes, lots of mistakes, but in a real safe environment. And actually, rather than being penalised for it, you were supported and guided and it was such a real valuable environment that I think that if I didn't have that grounding, I think my journey would have been very, very different, or my outlook and how I think about the game would have been sort of very different. So having that environment, I was very fortunate for that. So yeah, I mean, opportunity and those kind of things. I guess it's chance in some ways. You don't necessarily get the opportunity to select where you've been, but I had that. I happened to fall into this environment, and absolutely loved it.
I do want to ask you about the pathway and coaching courses in just a moment, but how big a role does, in terms of gathering more knowledge, as you said, but being curious, how much does having like that group that you talked about and collaborating with others? Because back in my uni days, I had someone who got very close to beginning to coach at Fulham, funnily enough, and he said that almost the biggest thing for him was finding just things that you liked from other coaches and taking those on board, slightly tweaking them to your own desires. Is that similar to your experience?
Yes. So, I mean, I do some work with Hampton Rangers, who are a local club, and have a great relationship with Steve, the academy, and Hampton Rangers, where we use their training ground, and we support. I still do some work with them, supporting the junior coaches. And when you're young, you quite often imitate and copy senior coaches. They copy their mannerisms and things like that. So you do, and again, you watch those young players. If they've had they play for a grassroots team, you give them a session. Their behaviours and what they put on quite often replicate what they've done. So you can see what type of environment they've been in. So I was very fortunate that when I started, I had some actually kind of a little bit more experienced coaches that, when I was copying their behaviours and their antics, actually was pushing you to a slightly more advanced level already. Don't want that to sound, like big-headed, but it helped me where I actually avoided some of the earlier learning obstacles that someone maybe that wasn't in that environment would have had to go through. So the habits I picked up from them were slightly more polished and more advanced in terms of skill set. So I was really, really, really thankful for that. And I think then once you become more confident in yourself and you become more curious and you start asking more questions and you know how to ask questions, and you start to become comfortable with your personality coming out as a coach, you then start to put your own spin on things, and you start to, you kind of lose that copying, mirroring, mimicking aspect of you as a coach, and your personality starts to come out a little bit. And yeah, that was something that I think I see in young coaches today. I think that's part of the journey.
Do you see people imitating you? Is it come full circle?
Sometimes, I mean, yeah, you can occasionally see little mannerisms come out, and you go, "Oh, that's." But I remember doing it and say, Alistair Jenkinson was a big influence, a big help. I noticed myself when I was starting to become more aware, I was mimicking some of his mannerisms. But that for me, a curiosity is in terms of communication, because football's dealing with human beings. So communication and how you communicate, how you deal with something, it's a big part. So I do a lot of reading in that area. So I became more aware of it as well, and starting to say the same things or use the same tones and same little mannerisms. But I think that's a natural part of it. I think that's, everyone goes through that, whether it's a short phase or a long phase. But you do that until you start to find your own voice and your own confidence and your own way of doing things, I think.
So getting back to your coaching courses and the pathway that you went through, how did you go about getting yourself? So in case there's any aspiring coaches or people who are just interested in how it all works, how did you go about getting involved with that, and what level have you risen to? How long did that take, etc.?
Oh God, you're winding it back now. So yeah, again, I think I'd just finished my level 2 about 2006, and again, Alistair Jenkinson was working with, was involved at the Fulham on the girls' side at that time, which was a centre of excellence, and I think the under-14s coach at the time, again a very very good friend of mine now, needed an assistant at that time, and so I stepped in. At that point, I'd started to apply for my B license. I think at that stage, which was at a level 3, the UEFA. Yeah, so that was a great opportunity to get involved with the 11 side of the game. I was still doing my own coaching bits and pieces. Well, with Alistair, we were doing our own sort of like company, if you like, at that time. So I was working across the spectrum of ages from 3-year-olds all the way up to adults in some aspects. So yeah, B license for that aspect. I then started to get involved more in the boys' side of things. I went to Aldershot. Again, initially working with, I think, the under 11s, but starting to get involved with under 16s and the youth team as well, doing some bits and pieces to help out there. And that, I think that then led on to, I think, a B license around 2008, 2009. And that then led on to me being really keen to start the A license. I didn't want to rush it. It wasn't a case of collecting certificates or collecting badges, whatever it is. It was a case of, I'm really keen to kind of see what the course is about, see what knowledge I can gain, see if I can upskill myself. And I started that, I think, around 2010. At that point, I was still at Aldershot at that point. And then I started on the boys' side at Fulham in the academy not long afterwards, which resulted in me finally getting my A license around 2013. And that was a really good experience, because at that point, the Fulham under 18 side had Steve Wigley in charge, and he was a big help in terms of taking all my questions and being patient enough to help me in that respect. Again, Mark Pembridge, who was taking the under 16s at the time, I can't speak highly enough of him in terms of the help he gave me in terms of allowing me to work with players and eventually do the session. So again, part of the pathway is who you meet and who helps you along the way. And I was very fortunate. I had a lot of people that allowed me the opportunity to work in these environments and help me and support me. And since then, I think it never, it's a cliche to say you never stop learning, but it genuinely is. Just because you gain a certain level of coaching certificate doesn't necessarily mean you can coach. I've genuinely met level 1 coaches who I think have been fantastic at working with young players and brilliant at getting through. You've also met, maybe level 4 coaches at the other end of the spectrum, and you've kind of gone, okay. So it doesn't necessarily make you a coach, but it certainly sets you on a path of hopefully that curiosity and that constant wanting to challenge yourself. And despite, I think in the meantime, I've done youth modules and FA Youth Awards and things like that, and they're all really good courses. And again, they just stoke the fire, and they just keep you questioning what you do, because I think the moment you suddenly go, yeah, I know it all, you're probably time to set it up, because you can always question what you do. You can always rip apart why you do things and try and find a better way to do it. So yeah, the formal coaching pathway is slightly different now in terms of how you pass them and how you kind of get on the courses. I think there's now a UEFA C, which is now in place of the level 2. The B license is still there, and obviously the A license is still there. But I would encourage anyone that wants to do it to be patient on it and take the right steps at the right time. There's no rush just to get on just because you want to say you're this coach or that coach.
Yeah.
Do it at the right speed, do it at the right time, because then you'll get the most out of it. And ultimately your players should benefit at the end of it if you're doing it at the right time, the right place, and you know why you're doing things.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for, again, deep dive into the world of how to get into coaching. Very much appreciated. Sort of rounding things back towards Hampton, just a personal question, really. Just wanted to ask, in terms of the players that you obviously coach, help with education, bring through, what is the biggest I've lost the word. Not joy, kind of on the right track, but like what like makes you proudest? Is it when you see the likes of Amate come and start for the first team, or is it actually more of what you said in terms of the education and how that ties in with their football and almost making them like more well-rounded as people? You know, where does that lie with you?
I think it's each to their individual. Seeing a David Amate make his debut at that time when Steve were at the ground was brilliant. And you know, it's only my first season, so I've only had a short time with Davey. You know, Steve had a much longer relationship with him, but you still have that real proud the outlook. You still feel really proud that he's gone out there and he's representing the academy at that point. And I'm sure Steve would have felt even more passionate about that and even deeper about that. But I think so there's that end of the spectrum where you have those sort of players and you're really pleased with that. Let's say in the future a player comes through the academy that is able to play for the first team and then maybe go into the pro game, you'd be really, really pleased and proud for that player. But I think equally then you're just as proud if a young player's in the academy, maybe he's not going to be good enough to play National League level or above, but works really hard, finds education tough, but works really hard and gets himself a really good grade and maybe finds himself an opportunity to go to university. I think you're just as equally pleased and as proud as that. You know, that's not necessarily, it's not just the football side of things, that's actually a part of it. You go, that's a great achievement for them individually. You might actually get someone who, you know, one lad who maybe not has didn't do as well in his school journey, comes and actually maybe gets a pass or a merit, and actually for them that's a really big achievement. So I think you look at each individual and look at their success, and it's not just they make it and play first team football. I think, you know, you have to look at them, and because you kind of get to know them through the year, you get to know where they are, and yeah, you can be really pleased for them when they achieve something that they're proud of as well.
Yeah, sounds, yeah. So it's a brilliant way of looking at it again. I think final sort of question. We'll look to wrap it up. As you said, first season. In terms of the future, have you got any sorts of plans, things in the works with the rest of the team for the Hampton and Richmond Academy?
The one
that
thing,
you can talk about.
No, well, I think the one thing that has been brilliant this season, from my perspective, has been being able to bounce ideas off Steve and Andy. I don't think there's been a week that's gone by so far this season where we haven't brought up an idea or questioned something we do. It really is an open environment where we're looking to constantly try and make the academy better, and that's being driven by, from my perspective, being driven by Steve and Andy. They've been really, they say they brought it this far, so I felt inspired to try and help them bring ideas to the table. So, you know, there's always things that we think we can improve. We've got some ideas in terms of trying to help the boys develop their kind of more footballing knowledge and skills and analytical skills for next year, and kind of bringing in sort of some sort of modules that we can really help them in that aspect. We've got ideas around how we can enhance the football program further and maybe give even more to the boys in terms of opportunities to develop in that aspect. Even with the under-19 squad this year, there's still a list of things that I think I can do better to help the team, and there's things we brought in this season that have worked, and there's other things that haven't quite worked, so we're constantly reviewing them. You know, so yeah, there's no real specific thing. I think, you know, I could be going around the houses and it would sound like our day-to-day chats, where sometimes they can go here, there, and everywhere. But Steve, Andy, and myself are all, and Caleb and Callum, Alana, Ollie, all the staff are constantly bringing up little ideas and questioning what we're going to do to try and make the academy a real successful place. I mean, there's a real drive and desire to not only support the first team with players, but also make the academy the best it can be. We don't have the resources of some of the other big football clubs around, but that doesn't mean we can't have a really successful program, and we can't give players who come to us a great opportunity in a great environment. So when they leave, at the very minimum, they go, "I really enjoyed those 2 years. I had a great experience." So yeah, we're hoping that we can improve it further and put some extra bricks in that next season we make it even better.
Brilliant. Well, thank you again very much for your time, Dale. Yeah, I look forward to. It sounds like we're in safe hands going forward. But thank you for giving up your time, and to everybody who has been watching. So, Dale, thank you.